Hello, Cliff. So, welcome to the Maestro Online.
Nice to meet you again, Robin. Thank you very much for the invite.
Thank you. So I've invited you here because you are very holistic in the company that you set up and their direction and making music and exams more accessible to a greater range of people. I wonder, first of all, how did your musical life begin? What was your journey?
Sure. So I started with playing piano essentially when I was about 5, and went through the grading system. I then took up a few other instruments. I went into bands, and then I eventually did a few tours, soloing and with bands, things like that, and playing for other artists. And eventually, yes, started my own music school, because I was teaching a lot at that time, and I really enjoyed it. So that's really where everything started, I suppose.
Okay, so you've obviously had a music bug that has led you to make music your vocation almost.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. For me, it's the education of music and what it does and how it helps the individual as well. It's not just about learning an instrument; it's about what else it can give you as
Great,
well.
yeah, and I often talk with my pupils about it's not about whether you get it right or wrong. It's about the journey we take together.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, completely agree. Um, it teaches you about other areas of your life as well, just
Yes,
by playing.
yes, absolutely. So tell me about your mission to make music more accessible to people, irrelevant of their, if you like, financial background or their wealth or their geographical location, etc. And how did you come to get to this stage? What's your vision?
I worked with a charity, Kids Rock, when I was at our music school, where I would teach music just for free for students who showed an interest in music, but there was no uh, ability to pay for the lessons. And what happened was there were so many talented students that when you start teaching them, you don't want to stop teaching them. And so you keep going and keep going, and then you've got to try and find funding if you can't afford to, for instance, keep buying all the exam books and paying for the exams. And it came to a point where we set up our own non-profit organization because we ended up with quite a few teachers wanting to do the same. And it dawned on us that to try and get funding for this was really difficult. And at the same time, we wanted to keep it going. So that kind of sparked the idea of, well, what if we created exams ourselves? What if we were able to produce something at a lower cost? Um, we found that students, for example, wouldn't turn up for lessons as well because of travel constraints, and that they wish they could have the lessons at home if possible. And so we thought, well, we got to have something online.
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of grew into the online music exams idea of
And of course, this is all pre-pandemic, at a
this.
point when actually this wasn't the mainstream,
No,
and people would perhaps perceive something like this as something that people weren't looking for.
no, exactly. In fact, understandably, a lot of people, kind of looked at the idea and thought, well, it's never going to work online, but not just from the exam side, but from the tutorial side, from the
Mhm.
educational side. And we had looked at both. So we were trying to produce courses online so people can actually have free resources, essentially. Um, and so we thought, well, everything should be online because we don't have to charge as much.
Yeah.
Theoretically, that's
Yes.
how we saw it.
Yes.
um, and we can get to a wider audience. And that's, yeah, kind of, we did, we did contact several authorities about it at the time, pre-pandemic, and it wasn't that important back then, to believe that we needed to rush into online so quickly.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
Really, it
So,
was.
what do you think are the key advantages of online then? Because I was in a meeting with a lot of leading music professionals the other day, and they were quite negatively talking about online music. And I got to speak out at that meeting and say, well, actually, there are some really good things about learning online. It's not all bad, and in fact, there are some strengths to it. What do you think the key strengths are?
Well, one is time. You have, for start, you can take your education when you want when it's online.
Yeah.
You can take it as it suits you. You can have a wider array of teachers to help you, wide array of courses. You're not, you don't have to be theoretically restricted to one time every week in one place.
Yes.
There's the reduced anxiety involved in it as well, being able to do something along, not just the educational side, but taking an exam. An exam is really daunting for a lot of people. In fact, I think it's more daunting for adults than it is for kids, because the adults have gone through that system and gone, no, I don't want to do that anymore. And unfortunately, it stops adults performing. And what I don't agree with is some people are negatively attributing the fact that the exam is a performance, and so you need to do performance face to face, where I would say that, well, the problem is that it's usually the case that many kids, their only performance is an exam, and that's not a positive experience. I understand that it's a performance, but it shouldn't be the performance that decides how you continue your career.
Yes.
You should be allowed to perform face-to-face in concerts and recitals, and therefore the exam itself is not that important as a performance as in face-to-face.
Yes.
So I feel like that being able to perform an exam online takes away the anxiety, the stage fright, the pressure to perform right there and then, because you can take the exam when you want. And you can retake it, and it's not the end of the world then. You don't have to wait, a couple of months to do your next exam.
Yes. Yes.
So I think that there's a real benefit to online assessment for music, as well as online course education for music, because you're opening up a much wider market to someone.
Yeah, and aren't you also really reflecting a lot of the music industry in that if you were a rock pop performing artist, you would go into the studio and you would retake your recording until you were happy that it was ready to sell?
Yes, yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and it's, you do that, and then you have your performance side face to face, which is what everyone wants to do. You want to go out and perform, you want to connect with people, but that's not what the assessment should be about, in my opinion. That's just a very small part of being a musician.
Yes. I'd like to now take you in a slightly different direction, because where you've begun and everything you've described with providing lessons to people who couldn't necessarily afford it, and the pros of online work have actually taken you further than that because of the geographical aspect to what you're doing, to countries where perhaps the gross GDP is much lower, and therefore music to some people would completely not be accessible. And we're talking more globally now. Tell us a bit about that.
Absolutely, yeah. So there's so many people around the world that want access to regulated qualifications that the current system does not allow for. And in some respects, when it is a face-to-face exam from, say, a UK exam board, and they have to travel far afield, there's a cost to the student for that.
Yes.
An unfair cost. But I understand from a business point of view, you have to charge in order to actually make it work. But being online means the cost doesn't increase. And what we've been able to do with our partners is provide the online course itself, the online learning facility can be reduced, and so can the qualification. And in some countries, it's difficult to get materials out to them because of certain politics within the government. South America, for example, is a really good place to start, where a lot of students don't actually get their materials that are sent to them, unfortunately, and being online increases the access to that.
Yes.
And there's no one in between to stop it.
Yes.
And that's where we've had a lot of positive response from students who would never have had the opportunity to get a qualification. And where we're doing this as well, not just for them to get a qualification, but it's to give them sort of a benchmark that they can then help themselves to get a job in the future as well, in music as a teacher, or doing their own online courses, or going further.
Yes.
and that's what I really like about it, that we can get to those places where people wouldn't be able to before.
I think it's brilliant. And then with your work in, let's say, India, Africa, those kind of areas,
Mm.
are you at the stage yet where you're able to see that more people are involved in music because of this accessibility, not just because of the qualification, but because the fact that for those that want qualifications, it has become accessible? Does that mean that people around them are more wanting to learn as well? Is that increasing the number of people learning, do you think?
Well, yeah, what we found is there's been more questions asked about these opportunities, whereas they weren't there before. And
Yeah.
a lot of people, yeah, they're querying, oh, how does it work? How is it possible? What does this mean I get? And it almost sometimes, and I'm not just saying this because of us, but this opportunity opens up a door where people go, wow, is there a catch to this? This seems a bit strange. Like, I can get all this here in my house, and I can get all that, I can get the qualifications, the education, and it's not as expensive. Do you know what I mean? But people are
Yes.
like, wow, I can actually, and when they see other people working with us and other companies and other schools, then obviously the confidence grows, and then we've started to see obviously a bigger catchment area in those
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah. So, where do you see things in the future? How do you see this growing? What do you see?
So because we want to continue to make things more affordable, more accessible, it doesn't stop at the prices and the technology that we have. So through the people that are currently taking their exams and through feedback, we're developing technology to improve the process and the speed and the ease of which people can take their qualifications. So we are continually developing our AI. In fact, some people do get confused when we say that we're using AI, because their argument, quite understandably, is that, well, you can't use AI technology to mark a human exam, especially in performance. And you know, in most parts of that, I do agree, because you know, there's lots of elements of the feel and expression that is difficult to replicate. But we're not doing that. We use AI as an ability to give people the ability to take the exam whenever they want. So we have an AI assistant that asks the students all the questions, all the randomized questions needed, and then it gets filtered and taken to a real human examiner to take the exam. But this way of doing it stops the bottleneck. So that's why we're able to have so many exams happening at any one point.
Right.
And it makes it easier. So we're trying to develop that further, of course.
That's very clever. So that's really a hybrid, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Yes.
Kind of like the cars of today, you know.
Yes. Yeah. I like that. That's great. That's great. And what about the styles of music involved in courses and the offerings? Are you finding that because you're accessing different cultures, that actually the styles of music for exams is much wider than you ever imagined? I.e., you're not just doing rock guitar or classical piano.
Oh yeah, and as a teacher, I'm embarrassed to say, like, I just didn't really think about it as much, and suddenly we're open up to all the amazing cultures around the world and their different takes and views and methods of teaching, and then we can just accredit them. Obviously you go through the processes, but it's like, oh wow, now they can be appreciated for what they've got, and they can actually get something for it. Not that, and I want to say as well that exams aren't the be all end all, of course. They're a benchmark and they serve their purpose. It doesn't mean that if you don't do exams, you can't be a great musician, or quite the contrary. It really doesn't. It's up to the person themselves whether they want to take an exam or not. But at least we're there so people can actually have the choice.
Yes, I think what is brilliant about your accessibility is an exam doesn't make you a great musician, but it does give you a passport to something else.
Yes.
And that's where they're really useful. And therefore, you're creating opportunities for a range of cultures from a range of financial backgrounds to
Yes.
still have that passport.
Yes, exactly. And it just open up that, even if it's a small bit of opportunity, it's something.
Yes.
And if I said through our partners as well, we're able to offer qualifications as well for free, as well as the educational part. And that's so amazing in itself, that we have the same holistic partner approach, that it's all about helping people. It's all about, you know, getting qualifications out there and making music sustainable for people.
So
So
has this kind of, I mean, you're not running a charity, but the way you're talking is like a charity ambassador. Has that always been something that's part of you?
yes, I mean, to us, the company started not for profit all the way through, and the only reason we have to have a for-profit company is really government concerns about making sure that there's a valid business there to keep the qualifications going, which is understandable. But we're going for a certified B company, so it's all about, you know, the eco-friendly. It's all about reducing costs. It's all about, no matter what, finding a way while keeping a business going to get what the qualifications to the end user. And if we can find it and get it for free, then we can do it.
That's brilliant.
So yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. Well, Cliff, I think that's a fantastic moment to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your global vision, your multicultural vision, and your vision that excludes nobody because of their wealth, income, background in any form whatsoever.
So thank you so much for having
Thank
me.
you very much.